So I'd like to start the questioning. The way this is going to work, I'm going to throw out a few softball questions and get him comfortable and ease him into this and lull him into thinking everything is fine, and then I'm going to start getting more and more aggressive with my questions. So just so you know, fair warning. What I would like to talk about, since this is a hometown lecture, is a little about your early influences here in Charleston, and if there were a few things or an individual or some of the things that might have influenced you as a young budding artist in Charleston, things that meant something to you that still mean something to you today.
You know, I think that my interest in art just happened very organically, the way many things do. I went over to a friend's house. One of my earliest memories is seeing a drawing on my friend Duff McCulley's refrigerator that had the fridge gallery. You know, kids have those. He was already represented by a gallery, and I was jealous. So drawings of fire engines and firemen, and I was inspired, so I went home, and at the time I was really into explosions, tanks, airplanes, army men, and I started drawing that. And my dad can draw pretty well, so he would sometimes draw with me. But I think what I was really enjoyed about it was just the problem-solving aspect of figuring out how to translate, you know, what you see and into something on paper that, you know, comes close to satisfying a likeness. And you know, as I grew, I got more and more into the technical side. The subject matter was almost irrelevant for a long time. Luckily, I was going to Porter Gaud, and I had a teacher, an art teacher, Shirley Gibson, who was a really strong influence for me. Great person, lived down the block on Wentworth Street. And then later when I went into middle school, I had a woman, Ms. Gleaton, who was amazing and really, you know, really let me get out of study hall to go to the art room. And I found inspiration in a lot of the architecture in Charleston. I would draw and paint houses, but it wasn't really until I got into skateboarding and punk rock in 8th grade that the idea of art and you know, creativity having to do with something that was exciting culturally and that, you know, I felt a real electricity about culturally merged. But I think a lot of things that I didn't understand were uniquely beautiful about Charleston did inspire me, but it took moving out of Charleston to understand how fortunate I was to be around those things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And then you spent your childhood here and then went 2 years to Wando High School, correct? Or Porter Gaud, then Wando, then?
Then I did a year of art high school in Idlewild, California, which was very helpful. But you know, Porter Gaud was great because you learn how to spell and write, but everything else about it was pretty horrible.
But that can be said of school in general, or not necessarily?
You know,
Is that where the whole obey thing came?
I'll try to, well, I felt like I was unhappy, and I didn't really know why until I saw, you know, a little bit more freedom and diversity over at Wando. But yeah, it was very strict. You had to wear a coat and tie from 6th grade on, or 7th grade on, and yeah, and there's a certain type of person that goes to Porter Gaud. I'll put it this way: when I found out that Stephen Colbert went to Porter Gaud, I knew exactly where he got his character from.
Mm-hmm. 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 Got it. Yeah. Well, we could turn this into a therapy session if you'd like. I have a beard.
Well, I mean, that's. Do you know anything about artists? That's all art is therapy.
Suddenly, my questions are out the window now. Okay.
But you know, Wando was not very productive for me artistically because my teacher was one of the strangest, laziest people ever. But I won't name names. But she She was kind of like the guy in Office Space, Milton, that is down in the basement with a stapler. And but she hoarded all the screen printing supplies, and one of my friends discovered them collecting dust and made the case for us to be allowed to use them, and that meant that we had 5 years of accumulated screen printing supplies to run through, which was great for my desire to make homemade T-shirts for all the bands I liked. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. So how did you end up at Rhode Island School of Design? Was that a school that you had read about or heard about?
I'd heard about RISD. I went on a trip to New York when I was the summer after my sophomore year of high school to see the Smiths and GBH in 7 Seconds and skate the Brooklyn Banks. And my friend Jay Haley, who I went to Wando with, his aunt taught at RISD. She taught sculpture. So I knew about the school from her, and people said, oh, RISD's a really good school. If you work really hard, you'll get to go there. I said, well, obviously I won't get to go there because I don't work really hard. But my parents didn't want me to go to art school, but I really thought that it was the only thing I was ever going to be able to do well that I cared about. So I sort of said, well, if you send me to liberal arts school, I'll embarrass you by failing out. So you can either tell people I did well finger painting or tell people I sucked at regular school. So that was that. But when I went to the school in California, I had teachers who, for the first time ever, treated me more like a less experienced peer who needed some guidance rather than a subject. And that was incredibly beneficial. That sort of respectful discourse was really beneficial to me. And at that school, I did academics in the morning and then art classes in the afternoon. I did drawing, painting, two-dimensional design, photography, and I developed a portfolio that I think was pretty strong for a high school student, and that made all the difference. So that's how I got into RISD.
And then while you were at RISD, you were fiddling around and came up with some notion of Andre the Giant on a burrito wrapper or something. Could you tell us that story?
Sure. I was working at a skate shop the summer after my freshman year at RISD, and I only made, I think, $4.25 an hour. So to supplement my income, I made homemade T-shirts of all the things I wanted for myself. I would buy a few T-shirts and say, I'm going to make this stencil and make a shirt for myself, but I have these, of the 3-pack, I have 2 more shirts left over, so I'll print those, and then since my boss is never at work, I'll just put those on the rack, and when people buy them, I keep the money. And yeah, that raised my income from $4.25 an hour to $4.50 an hour. So one time I was working on, I think, a homemade Clash T-shirt, and my friend Eric was staying over at my house, and he said, I'm bored, teach me how to make a stencil. And so I looked through the newspaper, saw this ad for wrestling with Andre the Giant, and said, why don't you make a stencil of this? And he said, no, I am not doing that, that's stupid. I said, what are you talking about? Andre's posse's taken over. This is, the Watershed was the name of the skate shop. I said, the Team Shed is done. Too many people know about it. About 12 people knew about it. So you know how it is with these subcultural things. Like, if you sold three cassettes, you're a sellout. You got to keep it really exclusive, really tight, really cool, really cutting edge. So, so the Andre posse, I said, was something we had to start up. And posse was a term within hip hop that was used for your crew, your gang, and the Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, NWA, Ice-T. They were all saying, my posse this, my posse that. So where punk rock had been the do-it-yourself movement for me through the 80s, the late 80s, hip-hop was becoming the new punk rock. And it was still a little bit taboo to be a white guy affecting hip-hop lingo, but yeah, we were courageous.
Yes.
So that's where that came from. But it started as an inside joke with a couple of friends, and I really thought it would last maybe 2 weeks. But But what I noticed after a short amount of time was that people were coming up to me saying, hey, you got any of those Andre stickers? I heard, you're the guy to get them from. And I thought, that's so weird. Why does anyone care about this thing? It's a stupid wrestling sticker, And we had no passion about wrestling. It was just an arbitrary choice. And then the local, and so having fun with it, the more I gave them out, I thought the more people were going to say, where are they coming from? And then, sure enough, the next thing you know, the local Providence Free Paper, their version of the city paper, ran a small bit that had a picture of the sticker and said, anyone who knows what the Andre the Giant Has a Posse sticker campaign is about gets tickets to the living room show of your choice. And the living room was where Suicidal Tendencies, the Ramones, Jane's Addiction, all the awesome bands came. And I was like, I want those tickets, but I can't tell them where it's coming from. That would spoil it. So I dropped off an envelope with stickers and a note that said, here's some stickers if it's any consolation, but I can't tell you where it's coming from because that would spoil it. And then they ran that in the paper and said, no definitive answers, but now we have a handwriting sample. But the thing that amazed me, and this was an education about how media works, is that by exploiting something that I knew they were open to, I could project that the sticker campaign was more important, more pervasive, more significant than it really was. Because I had made about 1,000 well-placed stickers at that point. And you'll never see me putting up stickers indiscriminately. And this paper had a circulation of 15,000. So within 2 weeks, I'd gone from 1,000 impressions to 30,000 impressions. And I really started to think about the control of media, the control of public space. So something that had happened very accidentally started to have some more profound implications, and I was fascinated and hooked.
Was it always that one kind of small sticker? Is that what started it? Oh, you got one.
That one. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. 1989. Yeah. Yeah, it started just as that, and because it had been such a spontaneous thing to create, and I was in art school where everything is hyper-analyzed and criticized, I actually was terrified to change it in any way because I thought that I had magically created this thing that if I tampered with it at all, the magic would go away. So that was the only sticker for quite a while. But then I made the really bold move of just isolating the head. And I changed the mayor's billboard around, or a guy running for mayor as a project about a year later. And that ended up in the news and in the newspaper and became a very big deal. And then I realized that size does matter. When you go from 3 inches to an 8-foot tall head on a 40-foot billboard, people really start to pay attention. And but I also realized that if people read into things, and so how people interpreted that billboard liberation was not always what I expected. And so understanding the power of making a move like that and being cautious of unintended consequences is important.
So in a way, that experience presaged all the work that's followed.
Yeah, it did, and it was a very, very in some ways traumatic because I ended up the cops came to RISD and asked around, and I was turned in, and I had to go confront Buddy Cianci, who had become the mayor. And it was a crash course in a lot of things, mm-hmm. But it did, I think, help me to decide how to deal with some of the things that I would do in the future. I mean, there's been a lot of trial and error and a lot of error in my evolution, but yeah, that was a significant moment for me.
Well, they say that an expert is anyone who's made every conceivable mistake within a narrow field of inquiry. So
Yeah.
maybe that's you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.